frustration level of what you're asking there. Is there any other way to do it? If I could get 100% of the people to brush and floss their teeth, we wouldn't be sitting here.
I mean, there are studies done on mascara to make sure it's safe before it's put out there. So I'm wondering why scientifically I haven't seen a study showing that it's safe to swallow fluoride, and I haven't seen a study that shows that it's effective to swallow fluoride.
So they evaluated those. They found the strengths of the studies, the weaknesses of the studies. Please don't photography. No photography, please. Stop.
May I ask why?
I don't want to be on your film.
This is a public place.
It's true, but it's not. Maybe it's my privilege not to be filmed.
But this is a public forum.
I would ask that you respect his request for privacy.
I will.
Counselor, we're not dealing with Love Canal.
We're not dealing with what?
Love Canal. We're not dealing with toxic wastes. We're dealing with the stabilizing of a naturally occurring element. An element that in some nutritional circles has been deemed as an essential element in your diet. We know that it's upsets your bone. We're not here today, and I will tell you right now.
Not a debate.
Not a debate, and I'll give you my source for that.
Yes.
I also will tell you that I feel badly that I'm going to respond to many of the things that Ms. Presley said while she's not here, but I'm sure that Dr. Cole is fairly capable of responding.
No doubt.
One thing I just want to make clear.
Let's not argue, okay? And that means
one of the things
not talking all at once.
One of the things that I want to go back and maybe address is her opening statement. Yes, there's research over here. Yes, there's research over here for it. Let's all forget that. There's 60 years of unprecedented, unequivocal research that dictates to common sense scientists and clinicians that fluoride is effective in preventing dental decay in the most susceptible populations. And your job as public servants is to serve those populations in need and to help everybody prevent a disease. Now, I'm going to just kind of go.
There's three or four pages of it. So back in 1999, they were aware that it's a topical benefit. It's not a systemic benefit. Now, I will tell you, when I first started looking into this, boy, I shut off my toothpaste. I no longer do that. I am not anti-fluoride. One of the things that, we haven't talked about this, but the issue of topical versus systemic, I think is one of the most important concepts here. And the reason is that it's something that all parties seem to agree with, that the benefit is topical, meaning that it comes in contact with the teeth. It's not systemic. That came out really in the late 90s. I'm going to read you some quotes of that. And that was my first flag that, wait a minute, if it's topical and not systemic, why are we fluoridating? Why are we fluoridating our water? So that was my first clue that said, I got to look into this more, I got to understand it. Now,
the frightening content of each chapter. At the end, they give things that'll curl your hair bad enough without having to read about chemistry that is difficult to understand and worrisome.
Mr. Napier, I'm reading this and I'm noticing that with regard to Antigo and I guess the Scottish village of Wicken, maybe another one that we're talking about them discontinuing before 1960. And then there's some, over on the other pages, there's some examples of them discontinuing it later, but utilizing fluoride mouthwashes, varnishes, and dental care, and that taking care of it. So that kind of gets back to my question. We've got other methods of utilizing fluoride for kids' teeth that are cheaper than they used to be and more readily available than they were back then. So why should we take risks with other people who are older, who might be more susceptible to it, when we've got these other alternatives?
Well,
If I can jump in, if I can answer that question for you. In the over 100-year history of the American Dental Association, it has been an organization that has attempted to put itself out of business in the sense of preventative health care. We have emphasized brushing, flossing, dental hygiene, everything we can do to get a human being to take care of themselves, and yet statistically 50% of the United States never go to a dental office unless it's an emergency, when it is too late. Most of those are poor income because they can't afford it, or they're ignorant, and it continually perpetuates it from their heritage, their culture, and their generational ignorance. Now, yes, you and I probably don't have cavities. Yes, techniques of brushing, flossing, and fluoride topically applied, and intelligence and commitment to this have reduced the instances in that strata of a population. But those that are most susceptible are still the ones with the greatest amount of disease. And that is the public health dilemma that you face, and that we have been addressing and trying to address for years. You always hear, why do you think Crest, Colgate, why do you think they're on the television? They make money on their products, but they are mostly our partners in this and contribute a great deal to the research that goes into the prevention of dental decay. There's so much that's coming in from the sciences that are showing us what the effects of poor oral hygiene, the bacterial contamination from the mouth that enters the body through gingival disease, how it affects internal organs and the physiology of the body. We have got to prevent this disease. The bacteria that we are getting in the mouth are becoming more and more resistant, and our only fight that we've got left in there is both systemic application of fluoride, topical application of fluoride, and educate, educate, educate. That's all we've got. Now, unless we can come up with a magic bullet that I've been hearing about for 30 years, that there's going to be a vaccine for decay sometime, but I've never seen it. So, at this point...
There is a paper, a white paper that the CDC put out, and you've probably seen it, where there's a headline that says fluoridation, one of the top 10 public health measures of the 20th century. You hear that quoted, Dr. Wong has quoted it, I've seen it in some of the literature. And that's what gets quoted. But if you actually read the article, which I have right here, I'm just going to read one little piece and tell you what it is first. There are two things that were in there. The first thing was, oh, by the way, the benefits that we've been telling you all along, which were 50 to 70% reduction in caries, is off by a factor of 3, and it's more like 18. That 18, by the way, is the Carlos and Brunel study, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So that's one thing, and aha, by the way, what we've been telling you up to this point is off by a factor of 3. The second thing that they came out with...
I'm sorry, Mr. Kill, what are you reading from?
I'm reading from a CDC, October 27, 1999, Achievements in Public Health, 1900 to 1999, Fluoridation of Drinking Water to Prevent Dental Caries. Okay,
and that is dated, what, 1999?
This comes from the CDC website,
Okay.
and it's on there right now, but it is, they're 19, and I'll leave this week, okay?
But that article was done in 1999?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. But the significance of this article is that this is the article, and if you've ever seen this reference, and I know you have, where they say that fluoridation is one of the top 10 benefits to public health in the second half of the 20th century. That's this article. But nobody reads the article. And the second So the first part was, by the way, early studies were wrong. It's only 18%. And I'm going to dispute the 18. And then the second part was fluoride's caries preventive properties initially were attributed to changes in enamel during tooth development, where it still hasn't broken through, because of association between fluoride and cosmetic changes in enamel, and the belief that fluoride incorporated into the enamel during tooth development would result in a more acid-resistant enamel. That's what people believe. However, laboratory and epidemiologic research suggests that fluoride prevents dental caries predominantly after eruption of the tooth in the mouth, and its actions primarily are topical for both adults and children. These mechanisms include inhibition of demineralization, enhancement of remineralization, and inhibition of bacterial activity in dental plaque, principally by disrupting the enzymes in the bacteria. Now, those are two very important things, and I read that and I said, wait a minute, there's something wrong here, So I went to the actual studies, the actual reports, to find out what did they really say, what happened. Now, the most important one is by a guy named Featherstone, and he had been a proponent of fluoridation in 1999. Prevention and reversal of dental caries, role of low-level fluoride. It was published in 1999, Community Dentistry and Oral Epidemiology. He says, until recently, the major caries inhibitory effect of fluoride was thought to be due to its incorporation in the tooth mineral during development of the tooth. There is now overwhelming evidence that the primary caries preventive mechanism of action of fluoride are post-eruptive through topical effects for both children and adults. Another one, fluoride has little preemptive, pre-eruptive impact on caries prevention, but prevents a clear risk of fluorosis. That's from Burt, 1999, the case of eliminating the use of dietary fluoride supplements for young children. Journal of Public Health. I'm not. I believe in using fluoridated toothpaste. I believe and I think fluoride does indeed operate with those mechanisms of preventing demineralization, doing remineralization, and most importantly, affecting the bacteria in the plaque. You shouldn't drink it, you shouldn't consume it. Okay, so that's point number one I want to make. I really don't think, I question that it is even working. Now, when I looked at that, I said, okay, as a scientist, when you get different lines of evidence, you want to try to make them consistent. You look for consistency. And I had an inconsistency. And you know what it was? It was the Carlos and Brunel study. 18% improvement.
Can you just explain what the Carlos and Brunel study?
I will.
Okay.
It was actually a study, collected data of 37,000 children between the age of 5 and 17 in the 80s. So the National Institute of Health actually collected the data. Carlos and Brunel were researchers that just took that data and did the comparisons. And basically what they did was they had non-fluoridated communities and fluoridated communities. And they compared 5-year-olds with 5-year-olds. And they looked at the cavities, basically. They were looking at surfaces, but they looked at cavities. And they compared them. 6 and 6, 7 and 7, 8 and 8, all the way up. And when you look at that,
What age groups complete?
5 years to 17, okay?
All from the same area?
No,
Different.
fluoridated communities versus non, all of them.
Oh, all of them,
So
okay.
what they're trying to
Understood.
isolate are those communities that have never been fluoridated.
Okay.
Now, they get other levels of fluoridation, and they get toothpaste and all that stuff, but they're looking at trying to isolate the effect of fluoridation. And so you look at it, and that average is 18%. That's what they quote. So I'm in a quandary, because I've got something that says it shouldn't work. And by the way, all the World Health Organizations, I have all that slide too. It really doesn't, I mean, you look in Europe and you don't see any difference between countries. So I had this dilemma. How do I resolve that? This says it works, these others appear to indicate it's not. Now, I'm a geoscientist, which means I like to visualize data. I don't like numbers, I like plots. And so I plotted the data. And one of the things that I observed, you're not going to see this, but I can send all this to you. One of the things I observed when I plotted, these are the age of the children, and these are the percentage difference between fluoridated and non-fluoridated communities. The only thing you have to pay attention to is this very first year, you got a big spike.
You just talked about that when you have science, you have double-blind, peer-reviewed studies. So I'm specifically asking whether
Ms.
it's
Ward, I
such...
will get those for you. I can't,
There's
right
one-
now in this discussion, I can't pull those up.
Okay, and my second question is,
They are there.
why on earth, when we have questions, would we not sort out the questions about whether or not it adversely impacts your health before we put it in the water? Because I think I just heard you agree that we're getting fluoride in a lot more places than we used to. Those grandmas whose teeth
right.
rotted out and had dentures, we're
right.
getting it in lots of places.
And-
So is
and
part
was
of that
that-
because we're fluoridating water
It's
throughout the
that
country?
very phenomenon that predicated the drop from 1.2 to 7.
Well, I know, but...
That was the recommendation of every single organization that looks at this,
But you're-
88 included.
Your own research group is saying we need to study that dosage more.
I'm not going to comment on that because I haven't looked at it and I don't.
Well, I got it
think
right
it's
here on
full-
my iPad.
It's brand new, I don't see it. It's brand new, I
National Research Council report, it's got a lot of interesting things.
We have it.
I'm going to just highlight a few things and give the significance. In that report, which was commissioned by the EPA, it did find some risk for dental and skeletal fluorosis, both stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3 at different levels. What's important is that stage 2 and stage 3 skeletal and dental fluorosis can occur at levels of less than 2 milligrams per liter. The decreased thyroid function can occur as low as 0.7 milligrams per liter. Neurological effects, reducing cognitive capacity, that's IQ, can occur at 0.3, although typically the studies that I looked at, or Chinese studies, are up in the range of 2 parts per million or milligrams per liter. The total load, the other significant thing that they did, very important to look at this, they looked at the total fluoride load by age group, from babies, nursing and non-nursing, all the way up to seniors like me. And what they looked at was how much comes, and made assumption about 1 part per million or 1 milligram per liter in the water, and how much comes from other sources. We talked about pesticides, lots of pesticide. Another important source of fluoride, this is 3 pages, over 250 fluorinated pharmaceuticals. Lots of fluoride in pharmaceuticals. I'll leave
Where does
this
that
with
come
you.
from?
I can't tell you exactly where it comes from, but this is just a list of.
Okay.
And so they took all this. There's fluoride in, of course, soft drinks, pesticides, the air. You get it a lot of different ways. What they found was that it depends on age. It's more for young than older, but roughly 40 to 60% of all the fluoride that we get comes from sources other than water, assuming that you're in a fluoridated community. Now, that hasn't always been the case. Okay, fluoride has come into our system over the last 50 years. And that was one of the stimulants that encouraged the EPA to lower it from 1.2 to 0.7, because they said, look, we're already getting quite a bit of fluoride. The other reason that this is important is that if you have 1 part per million or milligrams per liter, however you like to do it, in your water, and I know we're down to 0.7 now, but if you had 1, and if you're getting another 50%, that same amount in other sources, you're up to 2. That's where they're seeing effects. So when people say, oh, not to, yes, there are some health effects at 2 parts per million, 2.5 parts per million, 1.4 parts per million. We don't have that. We're at 0.7, we're at 0.8, we're at 1. You've got to consider the entire load. The entire load. That's in there. Great. And also in there talks about what the effect is for babies. They isolate that, nursing babies, they get 3 times the amount of fluoride that is above the danger level. Okay. So there are health issues. I will say, and I think Laura said it, and I will agree with it, I didn't find any studies that were so definitive that it could tell you absolutely are going to be harmed by this or you absolutely are not. I didn't find any that were of the level, and I didn't expect it, because we're not understanding the total cause. It's not like you're going out there and saying, oh, we understand exactly what this does and we predict that. These are empirical studies, and you're always going to have uncertainty. What I did find, though, was enough concern that I think we have to think about the precautionary principle. I mean, before I get into that.
Okay, we're getting close to our,
Okay.
we're on our 10-minute limit.
I'm wrapping it up.
Okay.
Okay. We've heard some words about the EP, the ADA and CDC, they're on the ball, they're lowering the level and everything. Let me tell you, they haven't been doing that willingly. They just haven't. Before it got lowered to 0.7, they were out there telling you 1.2 is the optimal level. That is as if they knew. Now, there's some doubt. So there's that issue. And also, one other thing, cost is a factor. That was a factor in our council. If you already have a 0.3 and you're spending the money to get it up to a 0.7 and you're not even sure, even if that's the right number, you have to wonder if it's worth it, okay? Let me just say the precautionary principle, and this is really where we kind of came down. When an activity raises threats of harm to the environment and human health, precautionary measures should be taken even if some cases cause and effect relationships are not fully established scientifically. It's a well-known principle for the environment and for health. The correct action, I think, is to stop fluoridating the water supply until that is better understood.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Keel. I know that you probably have questions for Mr. Keel, but we've been at this for about an hour and a half. Does anyone want to break, or do you want to continue?
This is an ethical dilemma as well. We don't have the choice. And I think that, let's say my colleagues here are correct, and it's wonderful, and it works, and it's great, and it fights decay. Shouldn't we still have the option not to have that in our water supply? I mean, it's the only chemical added as a medicine. Everything else is added to purify, chlorine, etc. So it's the only one that's added because we're trying to do something good, let's say. Now, I have seen the fluorosis go up. Now, I don't see a whole lot of kids anymore, but the ones I do see, I see a lot more cases of that than I ever did. It used to be, you know, a couple a year I'd see, maybe. Now I see, if I see 10 kids a week, let's say, 2 or 3 of them will have some form of fluorosis.
Studies that have been done to show that fluoride is effective over the decades established the lowest level of therapeutic efficacy, 0.7.
I thought they just came up with the 0.7 like a year ago.
No, but they lowered it from 1.2 to 0.7 because historically those levels were set for the South, because you heard this, because of the water, we drink more water because it's hotter down here. They were lowered levels in the North for the opposite reason. Now, because of what they call the halo effect, or the diffusion effect, that people don't live in the same place anymore, and everything that you buy that's made with water now has fluoride in it, whether it's a Coke or Arizona iced tea or whatever it is, there's fluoride levels in everything. So the cumulative effect is there. This is a legitimate thing to look at from a dosage standpoint. But the science hasn't shown us yet that we need to lower it below 0.7. And so we have a known therapeutic level that has 0 instances of any provable human physiological breakdown other than some modeling on the surface of the teeth. How is that taken care of? Depends on the severity of the disease. You treat effectively. Now, fluoride is a wonderful, wonderful benefit to mankind. It has many applications, both systemically and topically. The industry and the market has proved that through the fluoride toothpaste. Our science has shown. I am a referral base for MD Anderson. I get people who come to me with oral head and neck cancers that have been radiated from the shoulder up. They have no more salivary glands. They have no more saliva. Saliva being the primary buffering agent of the acids that bacteria produce. Saliva also being the primary plasma reservoir for fluoride ions that ooze up around the gum line in the plasma layer. And the number one thing that we do to these people is put them in fluoride trays every single night with at least 5,000 parts per million of topical application for 10 minutes. That's to kill the bugs because that's bacterial cycle. That's to reinforce the enamel and expose root surface tissues and to sterilize them. And I can guarantee to you that they don't sit with that in their mouth for 10 minutes without swallowing something. Now, granted, who cares if you die from fluoride or a squamous cell carcinoma? But that is the fact. The studies show it. Fluoride is effective. It is the single best public service that we can do from a dental health standpoint until proven otherwise. And I will be the first ones to hold them guys hand in hand, arm in arm, and walk in and say, get rid of this crap. If they prove it to me, but they haven't yet. And that's what you have to fall back on. The science that has been proven, that has been verified, that has been codified by these organizations around the world. That's our responsibility, and if we don't stay there, then we're doing a disservice to the population and to our children.
Is there a carry?
A really important question, and I know Tom knows this, as we talked about it. What percentage of fluoride that you ingest stays in your body? And what percentage is evacuated? You know the answer to that?
It's an extremely complicated answer.
Well, it's actually simple. It's 50%.
Well,
It's what? It's what?
It's 50% that kind of may transfer, but it's also a competition with other things, other elements that react similarly. So it can be less, it can be less for sure.
What was that percentage?
50%
50?
of the fluoride
That you ingest is filtered out by the kidney.
is filtered out, which means that 50% is not. Okay?
That means-
We had that discussion, and that's the answer you gave, is 50% is evacuated.
Yeah.
50% is evacuated through
Yeah,
glomerular filtration.
but I'm not
rates of
worried
the
about
kidney.
the 50% that's evacuated. I'm worried about the 50% that stays in my body.
See, that gets to